Welcome, everyone. Get this off the screen. So my name is Penny Delaney Cochran. I am an organizer for the Sierra Club. I work for a campaign called Ready for 100, which is ready for 100% renewable energy. And what better way to kick off day 2 of the Climate Ready Columbia Conference than to hear from other cities who are also on the pathway to 100% renewable energy. So it is my pleasure to introduce you to 3 amazing individuals whose credentials, wow, knock my socks off. I have 3 quick bios I'd like to share with you as everyone filters in. Our first panelist is Pham Baraso. Pham leads the Portland Clean Energy Community Benefits Fund, also known as the PCEF. He leads that team, and they're in charge of implementing Measure 26201, approved by 65% of Portlanders in November of 2018. The PCEF invests $80 to $90 million annually. I'm going to repeat that number because it's staggering. $80 to $90 million annually in new revenue for green jobs and healthy homes for all Portlanders. Pham brings a wealth of government experience and community leadership to the effort, where he works closely with the city staff, with City Hall, and frontline communities. Prior to his role at the city, Pham served as a senior policy advisor in the I'm going to mispronounce that, Pham, apologies, in the county's Office of Sustainability. Pham also serves on the state's Environmental Quality Commission, the board of Willamette Partnership, and previously served on the board for Imagine Black, which was formerly known as the Portland African American Leadership Forum. Pham holds a master's degree in environmental management from Duke University and an undergraduate in finance from Washington University in St. Louis. Welcome, Pham. Thanks for being with us. Our next panelist is Chris Castro. Chris serves as the senior advisor to Orlando's Mayor Buddy Dyer. He's also the Director of Sustainability and Resilience and Future Ready Steering Committee member for the City of Orlando. They're developing a comprehensive set of policies and programs that has turned Orlando into one of the leading cities in America, accelerating sustainability, resiliency, and climate action. Chris is best known for his entrepreneurial efforts prior to coming to the City of Orlando, including co-founding and being the president of a global sustainability nonprofit called Ideas for Us. He was also the clean energy consulting firm consultant for Citizens Energy and a renowned urban farming social enterprise called Fleet Farming. In 2020, Chris joined partners. He joined partners to launch Climate First Bank, which is the first B Corp community bank in Florida. The first B Corp community bank in Florida, and is working to advance ESG and local sustainable investing. Outside of work, Chris serves on many nonprofit and academic boards, including the UCF Energy Research Center, the U.S. Green Building Council of Florida, Project Green Schools, and Goodwill Industries of Central Florida. In December 2018, Chris starred in the National Geographic documentary on climate change called Paris to Pittsburgh. If you haven't seen that doc, I highly recommend it. He was there to share the Orlando journey on climate action to millions of people around the world. Welcome, Chris. Our final panelist is Representative Khanh Pham. Khanh is the daughter of Vietnamese refugees and the first Vietnamese American and currently the only Asian American legislator in the state of Oregon. As a community organizer, she helped to build a coalition to win the groundbreaking Portland Clean Energy Fund, the first climate justice initiative led by and for communities of color. Later, she ran for the state legislature and helped pass the Oregon Green New Deal. And in 2021, she was instrumental in passing an energy affordability bill, as well as the boldest 100% clean electricity standard in the country. Welcome, Representative Pham. Thank you so much for being here. I've asked each of our panelists to tell us a little bit about the work that they do. We're going to give them each about 10 minutes. And at this time, I'll call upon Representative Pham, who began to some degree the story in Oregon. So Representative Pham, thank you for being with us. Do you have everything you need in terms of sharing your story?
Yes, I think I do. I'm gonna see if I can share it now. Oh, it says allows. Oh no.
Uh-oh. Yeah, let me,
Oh shoot. I didn't usually I don't have a problem. You know what? I'm going to switch. It might be better to actually have. I have two computers, so I can. Yeah, you know, I think I'm going to actually ask Sam if he can share his story first, if that's possible, and then I can, our stories are very interlinked, so I think I can follow Sam if that's okay.
that sounds perfect. Good.
Okay, let me share my screen. Good morning, you all. It is good to hear. It is good to be here in this space with you all. Let's see if I'm getting my screen shared. And I grew up not too far away in Atlanta, or suburbs of Atlanta, so I have a lot of fondness and wish I could be there in person with you all. Okay, can folks see my screen?
It is starting to share. And your audio is kind of low. I want to make sure you're as close to your microphone as you can be.
This is what happens in the morning. I am gonna give me 10 seconds. I'm gonna run out and grab my other mic because the kids are sleeping, so I don't want to put the mic up. But I'm gonna give just 10 seconds for me to grab my other mic.
That'll give us a chance to check our audio too. Yeah. Our audio in your
do you need to mute while the audio is pending, or is that why?
Yeah, if that one's muted, then
You need to mute while they, I don't know,
You
because
might
mine,
need-
when I use Teams.
that makes sense, but it wasn't a problem yesterday. Yeah, I'll see if I can. Yeah, so everyone should.
Okay, is that better? All right, can folks see my screen?
Yes, well, actually,
Okay.
yeah, we still get a black, it says you're starting screen sharing.
Let's see. This should be weird. Huh. Well, this is what happens. I if this next try doesn't go because I'm on a different stop screen sharing. Let's see. Boom. Screen share. Screen number 2. Boom. Let's see. Does that work?
Hooray! Perfect.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, I can see it in your background. Great. All right then. Let's get this going. Good morning, folks. It's good to be here with you all. My name is Sam Baraso with the Portland Clean Energy Fund at the City of Portland's Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. I'm the program manager of the Portland Clean Energy Fund, and I use he and him pronouns.
Thank you.
All right. So what is the Portland Clean Energy Fund? Well, it is a program of the city that invests in climate action that both advances racial and social justice. It was passed by a ballot measure 26-201 in November of 2018 with over 65% of the Portland voters. Now, what's unique about this, and I think what Representative Pham is going to speak to shortly, so I'm like the second part of the story, but I'll tee it up because it's important, is this was the first climate fund measure created and led by communities of color in the US. And Representative Pham will speak to the broader story there, but as a broad coalition of environmental groups, labor, social justice groups, progressive businesses, and so many others, but with core was the leadership of and by communities of color in this effort. The fund does generate $80 to $90 million a year for these investments, and I'll speak to those a little bit later. And this last bullet here, and it's an important bullet, is that it's funded with a 1% gross receipts surcharge on Portland retailers that generate over $1 billion nationally and $500,000 locally. Certain things are exempt from them, but this is just an important note because as opposed to other revenue mechanisms, bonds, levies, property, just a range of other mechanisms, because of this particular mechanism, it's here year in, year out. Obviously, unless voters or council decides to repeal it, but it's here year in, year out, and it gives us the ability to think long-term in the way that we make our investments. It's not that we only have 3 years to get these investments going. And so that gives us that opportunity to really think and envision in a long way around how we make these investments happen and these programs work with longevity and service of the community. Why the Portland Clean Energy Fund? Well, I think this is unfortunately not a history that's going to be unique to Portland, but there's a long history of exclusion for people of color and low-income folks from the benefits of programs that have been created that support or that are addressing climate change or energy efficiency. And Portland, Oregon, the Pacific Northwest has a long history of being very progressive and very sustainable, sustainable forward thinking. And yet the benefits of that and tremendous investments that we have made in line with that have largely accrued to well-off, predominantly white households, as well as businesses. And so, this map here, that just the illustration, it's the redlining that took place within Portland many years ago, and it continues to have its effects present day in terms of those who have access to homes, home ownership, and those who get access to oftentimes these previous investments and making these investments. But generally speaking, this history is that folks of color have greater exposure, less access to adaptation. Low-income folks are more energy cost burden. Even in our solar industry, which is relatively mature here, 80% of those jobs go to men, and 89% of the workers there are white. And then stepping away, just more non-residential construction, 96% male, 80% white, and just a long history of energy incentive programs that have been exclusionary. The program works with our bureau, with our revenue bureau, collecting the surcharge itself, and then they deposit into a fund. Now, the city of Portland and my team issues, ultimately, we get a lot of community feedback on our request for proposals, and we release a request for proposals. Folks, nonprofits, primarily the organizations that can access the fund, they submit proposals, and then we ultimately have scoring panels that review the proposals, and it's the final decision makers are this 9-member committee I have beautifully pictured here. And this was a lot of intention that was placed into the creation of the fund, was the governance of this fund by a community that was representative, by a committee that was representative of the community. So they make the final recommendations on the funds before they go to city council. So if city council wants to deviate from those recommendations, they have to state so publicly in writing. So it just gives a lot more weight to the representation and making sure that community has a say in the way that these funds are distributed. And then we ultimately grant those funds, and we administer and manage those nonprofits as they deliver the projects. These are just some of our guiding principles that were developed with our committee, that the program is focused on climate action with multiple benefits. It's justice-driven, community-powered, and accountable. And it's in service to our 2020 climate emergency declaration of achieving at least 50% reduction in carbon emissions by below 1990 levels by 2030, and net zero carbon emissions before 2050. Now, these are the actual funding areas that were designated within our code. You'll see the largest chunk of funds will go towards clean energy projects. This is 40 to 60% of our funds, and those are really your commercial, your residential, your industrial building, multifamily building, energy efficiency, and renewable energy projects. These are the things that we tend to think about, folks getting their homes weatherized, solar panels on their homes, the heating, ventilation systems upgraded to be much more energy efficient. We have about 20 to 25% of the fund that's set aside for workforce and contractor development. And this is instrumental to think about the workforce and making sure that we are both diversifying the folks that are working on these projects, making sure there are more women, people of color, folks with disabilities on the actual projects, and supporting pre-apprenticeship programs, and others, as well as diversifying the contractors that get to lead in these projects, because that's a primary avenue for generating wealth in these projects. So it's about both workforce and contractor development and investing in those. We have 10 to 15% of the fund that's set aside for green infrastructure and regenerative agriculture. These are the things where I generally say you're putting green stuff into the ground and sequestering carbon that way, whether that's through trees or community garden plots and so forth. And then there's a set aside 5% for innovation. And that's for things that address greenhouse gas emissions and provide community benefit, but don't otherwise fall into one of these categories. I just showed this image here to illustrate the diversity of the types of projects that we can fund and that we have been funding. At the top left, you have street trees. You got folks who are coming together in the middle, coming together and planning on their projects. We've got what folks are used to seeing and thinking about, you know, solar panels being installed on a commercial building here. And we've got a lot of, you know, envelope work that's happening on the bottom left to make sure that a building is insulated and tight and can hold that energy. And we've got, you know, some regenerative agriculture plots, and we got someone here learning. So it's a diversity of projects. So the program is complex, and it acknowledges the complexity of the things that we need to move forward in our community these days. I'm not going to go through this list in detail, but what I'll just say is that this was our first portfolio. Last year, we funded our inaugural set of grants. It was 8.6 million. So in many ways, a beta round. We funded 45 grants. So it was a large number of grants that we funded with a heavy emphasis on planning grants. But in order to seed future projects, but we did fund about 16 implementation grants. This is where folks were doing something. And these are some of the things folks were doing. They were investing in deep retrofits in Black-owned single-family homes. 5 of those homes are going to get solar panels, 2 of those with battery backups. We're going to do deep energy retrofits on single-family affordable properties focused on the Black community. Created a match savings fund and a curriculum development program to support Black homeowner energy efficiency and solar development programs. And we're about to get our first solar install from that in a couple of weeks here. We funded residential ductless heat pump installations for low-income homeowners, as well as 15 to 20 homes of BIPOC-owned homes in the Jade District. This is the district that Representative Pham is in. We also funded a whole host of tree plantings, gardening programs within correctional institutes and schools, as well as de-paving efforts, where we take pavement out in areas that have a lot of high pavement and that are heat islands, and planting trees and other native vegetation. We also funded 4 workforce development grants and 29 planning grants, as I mentioned. Now, we're currently, as we move forward, we're currently now in the review and selection process for our next major chunk of grants. And there's a significant scaling up of the program, but for 60 million in available funding. We've got a quarterly mini grants program, a heat response program, and so much more. But I just want to acknowledge that we're still very early in our development. So there's a tremendous amount of learning that's happening, and we're excited to see where we go forward and to make sure that these investments are really dovetailing with all the policies and other efforts that are happening within the city regionally in order to bring life and help us fulfill our climate emergency declaration goals. So with that, I know I certainly will get the questions, but I'll stop there and turn it back over to you all to see where we go from here.
Well, thank you. We are going to hold the questions for just a little while. At this time, I'll check and see if Representative Pham is ready to tell her story.
Yes, I am.
All right, Sam, we'll let you let go of the controls there.
Let's see.
All right, we can see your slides.
All right, let me see if I can. All right. Well, thank you all. I'm so excited to be here. My name is Pham, and I use she or they pronouns, and I am so happy to be here with you all bright and early on a Saturday morning. So I am the Oregon State Representative for House District 46, and before I was an Oregon State legislator, I was a longtime community organizer here in the Jade District, as well as, you know, I've been a community organizer my entire adult life. And so it's really great to be here with other community members and organizers and activists who are thinking about how we build a just transition in each of our local communities. So today I'll talk a little bit more about the Portland Clean Energy Fund, more from a community perspective, how we developed our coalition, why, and how it's continuing to grow at the state level, how we're continuing to build our power from what started with this citywide coalition. Let's see, click here. So Sam already talked a little bit about what the Portland Clean Energy Fund is and the revenue mechanism. I will just say, as community groups, we have been constantly told every time we have something we want for our communities, whether it's an idea for job training or for trees in our neighborhood or for solar panels or community solar, we're constantly told that there just isn't enough money. And we know that's not true. Corporations in 2017 just got a 40% tax rate cut. And so our challenge was to figure out, how do we find revenue to fund the things that our communities desperately need in the midst of economic crises and growing economic inequality, racial injustice, as well as a climate crisis. And in Oregon, we've been experiencing extreme heat waves. Last year, we had about 100 people die when there was a heat dome event that put our city at 117-degree weather for several days without any nighttime cooling. So we know that there's tremendous climate disasters, from wildfires and drought to extreme heat events, that are really threatening our communities and threatening BIPOC and low-income communities the most. We are hardest hit, first hit, and we don't have access to many of the benefits of the green economy, as Sam explained. So this creates a fund about $60 million a year, $60 to $90 million a year in annual revenue for green jobs and healthy homes, prioritizing frontline communities, people of color, and low-income Portlanders. So we started out with this steering committee, which constituted communities of color led organizations, as well as grassroots environmental groups. We have never worked together before when we started. It took us about a year over a year really, to develop this initiative and start to build trust with each other. We started with the concept, like, what would it look like to have this 1% tax? But we had to figure out, like, what would it fund? How would we structure decision-making? How would we make sure that frontline communities wouldn't be disproportionately hurt by the revenue mechanism? People wanted to make sure that it wasn't a regressive measure. And after months and months of discussions and trust building, we were able to finally launch the ballot measure campaign. And you can see here some of the activities and groups that we engaged. We used culture and art. We have here on the lower right-hand corner the Portland Power Squad, where we would go to events and talk about what the lies were that, of course, Walmart and these big corporations were spreading about us. We're spreading about PCEF, right? They were saying, oh, this is going to hurt low-income communities the most. It's gonna raise your cost for groceries and things like that. And so we really wanted to make it clear they're using what we had a monopoly man. You can't see him there, but it was representation, someone kind of with a monocle and the whole top hat suit, and kind of just trying to spread fear. And then we had Weatherization Wonder Woman on the left, Captain Community in red, and I forgot the solar. It was super solar or something like that. So anyways, we just had a lot of fun really trying to educate our community through art, as well as through petition gathering, signatures, and door knocking, to really talk about what their vision was, what our vision was, and our shared vision for both lowering utility bills, creating good paying jobs, while taking bold climate action. And Portland voters really liked it. I also wanted to share that for us, this was part of a larger vision for a just transition. I know many of y'all are also thinking about on many fronts, how do we transition right now from this extractive economy that we know we can't continue. It's unsustainable. It's destroying our planet, and it's exploiting people. And how do we transition and build new solutions? How do we start divesting from this extractive economy and investing in building a new living economy that centers ecological and social well-being as our primary goal, and is really transforming our relationship to both natural resources and to other people and to labor, and in a way that is making sure that our governance and decision-making is grounded in deep democracy, is grounded in the people who are most impacted being able to make the decisions. And so for us, PCEF is really about this larger vision and framework, about drawing down both money, but also decision-making power from these huge international or national entities, often corporate entities, as well as even in our own governmental systems, to really make sure we're democratizing wealth and power. So if you scroll down into that framework, we really want to use this values filter and try to move capital in a way that shifts economic control to communities and advances ecological restoration and really centers racial justice and social equity as we're democratizing wealth and power. So as Sam mentioned, PCEF passed overwhelmingly on a nearly 2-to-1 basis in 2018. And our grassroots coalition went up against some of the largest corporations in the world. And it was such a huge boost for our organizations. We had never launched a ballot measure campaign before. We had very little funding. It was really led by groups that used our existing organizers. We did have, I was on staff as the environmental justice manager at Apano, but I wanted to say, like, it wasn't, sometimes people feel like, oh, you have to be so powerful, or you all had your stuff together before you launched. But in truth, I would say we didn't know what we were doing, but we recognized that we had to do something given the immensity of the crises we face. And so this was a huge capacity building exercise for us. We knew we knew that we didn't know if we would win, but we knew that launching this would actually strengthen our capacity to know what it took to win a campaign at the ballot. And that was what our goal was as well, not just to win this fund, but also to build our muscles, our electoral muscles. So Sam talked a little bit about how it works and what it funds, and the 9-member grant committee that really reflects the economic, racial and social diversity of our city. And he talked a bit about some of the grants that we're funding. It includes weatherizing homes of low-income Portlanders, and ductless heat pumps that are going to keep us cool during these heat waves. It includes job training for people who are formerly incarcerated. I mean, there's so many areas where we need to broaden the green economy to include all of Portland. Okay, so I will say though that so after we passed, we realized we wanted to actually take our movement and make sure that we are really building a Green New Deal in the whole state of Oregon. We went on so I was at the time part of OPAL and the Oregon Just Transition Alliance, which was organizing a Green New Deal statewide listening tour. And what came out of it was these 10 planks of what communities felt were the most urgent issues in our communities, that we needed to create jobs that center workers while we're investing in communities that are already experiencing the impacts of wildfires and droughts and floods. And how do we do it in a way that's advancing the clean energy opportunities? How are we making sure that we're transitioning to renewable energy and creating creating those cooling centers and those smoke shelters that our communities need now, as well as really dismantling and confronting the white supremacy in Oregon. In so many parts of Oregon, we're really alarmed by growing white supremacy movements and organizations. So or communities are identifying, we need to actually dismantle. And this was during the height of the Black Lives Matter protests, where we were in parts of rural Oregon, people were courageously standing on street corners, holding up signs, Black Lives Matter, and being confronted with Proud Boys and people who were armed on the other side, counter protests. I mean, Oregon is actually a very red state in most of the state, and people are, there's a real contestation over what the vision of Oregon is going to be. And we are really heartened to hear in all corners of the state, so much support for really wanting to confront the legacy of white supremacy in Oregon. So, okay, so I guess I should just say, so as we were doing this tour, actually, even before, actually what I was saying, it took us a year to plan this tour. As we're planning this tour, we're already launching in these community conversations with groups and building this platform ahead of time, because we wanted to ground truth this platform, but we already, as community organizers, had developed many of these planks. And I was already starting to think, how can I start to, how are we going to pass these policies at the state level if we want to pass them? And at the same time, Representative Khanh announced in January of 2020 that she was not going to be running again for her seat. And so that opened up the seat in my district, House District 46. And as part of this movement, wanting to kind of continue to build, wanting to make sure that our district, which has never had an Asian American representative, despite having the J district and including some of the neighborhoods with the highest concentrations of Asians and Pacific Islanders, I was asked to run, and I decided to take the leap. So in January of 2020, I announced, and after a campaign that really mirrored in many ways and drew from many of the same volunteers and some of our volunteer community structures, I was able to win against Jeff Cogan, the former Multnomah County Commissioner Chair, to represent the district. And as a newly elected state representative, I was really proud to co-create and co-lead with the Oregon Just Transition Alliance, the Oregon Clean Energy Opportunity Campaign. And that constituted 3 bills. First, we started out with political education, building leaders. So we had the Environmental Justice Leadership Institute, which included over 170 participants from across the state. We did popular education about energy justice, as well as learning by doing. We had grassroots action teams that learned about how the Oregon legislature works, and had guest speakers from the Community Energy Project, so we could actually envision the kinds of projects that could come from our bills. And each grassroots action team had a member of the steering committee, and then we had grassroots members who would then send out postcards or participate in lobby meetings or phone banks or write letters to the editors. And the 3 bills that we were leading on were the Energy Affordability Act, which allows our Public Utilities Commission to set a discount rate for low-income Oregonians, a Healthy Homes Bill, which allocates $10 million so that we have a fund for low-income Oregonians to be able to weatherize their homes, to do home repairs, many things that build resilience and energy efficiency in our homes, but also helps improve the health of the people who live in the homes as we're facing smoke events, and many of our Oregonians are also facing the health consequences of asthma when your home isn't well insulated, and really trying to really address the intersection of public health as well as environmental pollution. And last but not least, we had HB 2021, our 100% clean energy for all bill, which sets an emissions-free clean electricity standard by 2040 and includes environmental justice communities in that, as well as some of the strongest labor standards as well. So again, these are many of the same groups you'll recognize, except now we just broadened our coalition to include groups in Southern Oregon, to include groups in Eastern Oregon. Many people think that our coalition is just in urban areas, but actually BIPOC communities are throughout the state. And so we really wanted to make sure that farm workers in Woodburn were able to talk about some of the health and energy challenges facing their communities. And legislators really, that was really impactful to legislators who many of them are Republicans or heard or may perceive this as just a Portland issue. Climate seems like it's just something that Portland communities care about or Portland metro communities care about, but actually we really highlighted the ways in which energy justice is an important issue for all communities across the state. So last year, we were really proud to have the governor sign the bill. You can see some of the groups that were involved in helping to pass it. And I will just say that as I know that it seems like, having done this presentation to cities across the state right now, it often is perceived as if, oh, in hindsight, it looks like this is just a seamless path to get to victory. But so much has changed from our communities. When I think about what has happened in the last 5 years, I just can't believe how much the sense of what's politically realistic has shifted. We were frankly on the defensive for many years, fighting false solutions, and many of our organizations, BIPOC organizations, were seen as really just peripheral boxes to check at the end after, the solution's already been fixed, but can we just bring them in to kind of equity wash our solution? And I don't want to imply that this was all smooth or easy sailing to get to this place. But despite all of the challenges that we face, both organizationally and our movements, we are moving forward to build the political infrastructure that we need to build our movement for a just transition. And through the Portland Clean Energy Fund campaign, and then through my own campaign, and then through now statewide campaigns led by groups like the Oregon Just Transition Alliance, launching statewide campaigns for clean energy opportunity, we've been able to start to learn what it means to build truly frontline led campaigns, and build new leaders who are able to actually seize these moments, build the infrastructure so that we can have leaders available when we have openings and moments where we can actually demand systemic changes. After a summer of wildfires and 2 deadly heat waves, and actually a deadly ice storm that took out power in the state for days and weeks for some, we know that we need to build power for bold transformative changes that our communities really need. So I'm happy to chat more with you all. Sam is also a wealth of knowledge, but I just wanted to end with, if we're not prepared to govern, we're not prepared to win. And it's so important that that frontline communities, BIPOC communities, low-income communities are part of the decision-making power and leadership so that we can share our vision for governance. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We hope you'll stick around for a few more minutes. There are a couple of questions that popped up in the chat. Before we get to the cues, I would like to invite Chris Castro from the city of Orlando to tell us a little bit about what Orlando's done and doing, and maybe give us a peek at how it's done in the Southeast in a market like Florida. Chris, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Penny, and to Representative Pham and Sam. That was very inspiring. I've been following the work that you all have been doing in Portland for over 15 years to build this momentum, and you all are doing it absolutely the right way and building the capacity throughout our residents and with BIPOC communities to put pressure on our on our elected leaders to move in the right direction. And it's just really inspiring to hear that. My name is Chris Castro. I'm here at the City of Orlando. I've served as the Mayor's Senior Advisor for this work, and I direct the Office of Sustainability and Resilience. And like Portland, in fact, it's funny, there is a book that compares Portland and Orlando's sustainability by Dr. Bruce Stevens from Rollins College. And it does a lot of interesting parallels at our work. People joke that Orlando is becoming the Portland of the Southeast, and they call us Portlando in a joke and request. But what got us to this point is Mayor Dyer. I'm actually at the Mayor's Neighborhood Summit today, speaking to you from the summit. And what got us here was the leadership of our current mayor, Buddy Dyer, who really had the foresight that if Orlando was going to continue to grow at the rapid pace that we are, that we needed to change our trajectory and our mindset. Orlando's the top 3 fastest growing MSAs in the country. We have over 76 million visitors per year, making us the most visited destination in all of the Americas. And in addition to that, we are seeing about 1,500 people move to the Orlando region every single week. And that has not stopped during COVID. So you can imagine thinking about sustainability is really about how do we sustain this type of growth in a more responsible, equitable, and sustainable way. And so Greenworks Orlando has been the brand that we have built and really look across many different focused areas. Of course, today we're focusing on clean energy. I also think it's really important for us to center how the work at the local level is trickling out to impact and influence the global framework for sustainability. Hopefully you all have heard of the Sustainable Development Goals, and as you can see, SDG 7 of affordable clean energy, as well as 11 sustainable cities and communities, and 13 climate action are all interwoven. All of these goals are interlinked, and we have been doing the hard work to really measure and track how our local priorities are actually contributing to the global goals, and recently published this voluntary local review. Encourage you all to check that out. I think it does a really good job spotlighting how we're advancing clean energy through the lens of this global framework. So I think everybody in this conference here probably is aware of the climate crisis and emergency that we're in. And in order for us to protect the safety and welfare of people, planet, and our economies, we have to cut global emissions in half by 2030 and reach net zero by 2050 in order to mitigate that 2-degree rise at maximum, and ideally the 1.5-degree rise from pre-industrial levels. This is a great graphic by the IPCC that's really looking at our current policies, the pledges and trajectories, as well as where we actually need to be going. And as you can see, we're not going to make it if we continue in the status quo. And so cities are being looked at more and more as the real catalyst for this transformation. Right now, cities around the world are hosting over 55% of the global population. They're producing upwards of 3/4 of the global greenhouse gas emissions. And of course, many of them, over 80% are actually not meeting air quality standards. So we know that cities are a big culprit of the problem, but we're also in the driver's seat to drive forward innovation and creativity and ingenuity that gets us to these goals. Here's a snapshot of Orlando's greenhouse gas emissions footprint. And as you can see on the right-hand side with the pie chart, the green and blue wedges make up 72% of Orlando's Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions, and they're associated with residential and commercial energy use. Unlike other parts of the country, here in the Southeast, especially in Florida, we have about 11 months out of the year cooling, right? So we don't have a huge heat load, and as a result, we don't have a lot of gas connections to our individual facilities. Most of our emissions profile is coming from the emissions profile of the electricity that these buildings are producing. And of course, industrial and commercial properties with gas for space heating, water heating, cooking, and the like. And so for us, thinking about how we decarbonize our power grid and our buildings is one of the greatest high impact areas that we're focused on. And of course, that yellow wedge is on-road transportation emissions. So buildings, power, and transportation are the big areas to achieve our zero carbon economies in the short term. And so here's a little overview of the focus areas, the high impact actions that not just Orlando, but cities across the country have worked together to identify. This is through the American Cities Climate Challenge. And you can see here that we're all prioritizing reducing building energy use and driving energy efficiency. That is still the most cost-effective way to reduce pollution and carbon emissions. Number 2 is decarbonizing the electric grid, increasing renewables. 3 is reducing vehicle miles traveled and promoting transportation alternative programs. And 4th, electrifying everything, our vehicles, our buses, our buildings. Today's, I'm going to, with the very short amount of time, run very quickly through some policies and programs that we have implemented in the city, as well as some research that we've done to really begin charting our pathway to this 100% future. And starting out, it's important for you to know that Orlando owns and operates our own municipal electric and water utility. It is fully integrated, vertically integrated, meaning we own the power generation, transmission, and distribution, all the way down to the AMI metering infrastructure throughout the city. And like most power companies around the country and around the world, we're still using fossil fuels for the primary fuels to power our cities. We still have 2 last coal units that are powering Orlando, some natural gas. But in 2017, the city did move forward with passing 100% renewable electricity policy for our city operations by 2030, as well as citywide by 2050. And what that did was it really, it accelerated our transition towards clean energy unlike we've ever seen. Our utility, shortly after that policy, started an integrated resources planning process, an IRP, which is really a strategic planning forecasting exercise to look at the future load out to 2050, and then how we're going to meet that load with demand side management and, of course, electricity generation from clean sources. I'm happy to say that in this modeling, 300 different scenarios being looked at, we came out with a very good aligned strategy with the city, and that is net zero by 2050 for the entire city's power, with intermediate CO2 reduction targets. And it required us to early retire our last 2 coal-fired power plants by January 1st of 2027, with more than 50% reduction in 2025. So we saw that these plants could run till 2050 and beyond. And because of the climate commitments that our mayor and elected leader and community moved forward, we were able to accelerate that closure and are in the process of doing so. Cities like Columbia have the opportunity of then thinking about, well, how much rooftop solar potential do we have here in Florida? Of course, renewables from solar is primarily the main renewable energy resource we could tap into. It is an Achilles heel, in my opinion, whereas other states have the ability of tapping into hydroelectric and wind and solar, or even major transmission corridors from other states. Florida is a little bit of we're a peninsula, but we're a bit of a kind of an island sticking out, and don't have a lot of that redundancy, which makes our transition very complex and very challenging, especially when solar is really the only resource. Good news is that we've mapped every rooftop in Orlando, and we have basically 2 gigawatts of rooftop solar potential. That's 2 big nuclear power plants. Nuclear power plants are about a gigawatt each usually, and so you're talking about 2 massive nuclear power plants on city rooftops coming from the biggest nuclear reactor we have in our solar system, that is the sun. So we've started to map out those rooftops and identify the opportunities. We've also started to look at our own city facilities, our critical infrastructure like emergency operations centers, fire stations, 911 call centers, because of course we get hit by hurricanes, as you all do. And when that happens, usually our power grid goes down, and we need to make sure that we have resilience and reliability in times of disaster. There's a great tool you should look into called Renewable Energy Optimization, that helps you look at the amount of solar and storage and other technologies to allow your building to go completely off the grid and sustain operations. We have started to then use that data to roll out significant amounts of rooftop solar. This is an example on a new neighborhood center that's being built in one of our historically Black communities known as Paramore, just southwest of downtown. And we have a couple megawatts of rooftop solar both installed and currently being installed on fire stations, neighborhood centers, and much more. In addition, our fleet and facilities complex has had solar for a number of years, but we're about to build a solar canopy to provide 32 conduits for charging stations in a new EV lot. We are also transitioning our fleet to 100% electric and alternative fuel by 2030 and are rapidly moving in that direction. In Florida, we are very challenged with our regulatory structure for electricity. And in short, we don't allow for third-party sale of power. One of the things that we've done with Sierra Club and the League of Women Voters and Ideas for Us and other groups is partnered with the Solar United Neighbors organization to host solar cooperatives. We have done several megawatts of rooftop solar through these co-ops over the years, and I serve as one of the founding directors of the board that brought this to Florida, and this has become one of the best tools for Floridians across the state. Over 15 megawatts of rooftop solar has been installed in the last 5 years just through this cooperative solar model, group buying programs. Financing then becomes the big issue. And of course, we've structured different programs for our low and moderate income households. We have a program called SELF, the Solar and Energy Loan Fund, that provides unsecured low interest loans to LMI communities to really make weatherization, resilience, and clean energy improvements to their homes, creatively structuring these loans to allow the savings to be greater than that and monthly payment and really be cash flow positive from day one. Obviously, many of our communities are moving. This video doesn't seem to be playing for us, but it was going to be an aerial of one of our solar farms. This is on a coal ash landfill. We've been trying to look at brownfield sites and be able to convert those to clean power sites. And we have launched a 2030 solar pledge to get businesses to subscribe to these community solar programs. Orlando is a big subscriber. We've subscribed 52 of our facilities that are not necessarily suitable for rooftop solar. Like you can see our city hall with the dome roof, not the best use for PV, but 100% of that power is coming from those solar farms. And so we're subscribed in terms of our parks, our fire stations, police headquarters, and many others. And then, yeah, it looks like a couple of my videos, unfortunately, aren't being played. I wanted to share more about what we call photovoltaics or floating solar. This is becoming one of the most exciting new applications for renewable energy. And in Florida, I joke that we're an Atlantis in reverse. We're basically a state that's built on a coral reef, limestone, porous, and we have a bunch of these man-made water bodies that we build in order to mitigate flooding and manage stormwater. Well, most of those don't have any other use than holding that water, and they're perfect applications, unhampered often to land solar. And so we have some at the airport, we have some at wastewater treatment plants, and we're a national test site for the National Renewable Energy Lab, known as NREL, to really scale and research all types of ways to grow photovoltaics. And of course, we can't move to 100% renewables without talking about energy storage, right? Renewable energy is intermittent. We have to be real about the fact that the capacity factor of solar is 25 to 30% at best, whereas these coal and natural gas and nuclear plants are 96 to 98% capacity factor, meaning they're producing that amount of power, their capacity, for 96 to 100% of the time, whereas solar doesn't. So we have to start to think about that. We're testing now green hydrogen, lithium ion, vanadium redox flow batteries, even electric charging stations that are bi-directional. We call it vehicle to grid or vehicle to home. And now we're using our EVs as a way to match and true up the solar generation that becomes intermittent because of cloud cover or other reasons, right? So now if we can couple storage and solar together with smart controllers, we can ensure that solar is a dispatchable, reliable resource for utilities, and that's how we really scale. All of this stuff, by the way, is shared in a new case study that was published by ICLEI about Orlando's transition to 100% and where we are in our progress. And encourage you all to Google that Orlando 100% case study, and you'll be able to find it. And in my intro, it was mentioned that I was part of the Paris to Pittsburgh documentary. I really encourage you all to check out this if you haven't already. It's a wonderful film, an inspiring and an empowering film about real work happening in communities across the country to advance climate action. So with that, I will yield back to you, Penny, and we'll dive into maybe some questions.
Holy moly, I gotta check and make sure my socks are still on because I'm pretty sure they were just knocked off. by the amazing work in Portland and Orlando. We had a couple of questions come through the chat. I'm going to do those first, and we're going to open it up to the room and see what questions we have here. There was a couple of questions. We're curious to know how Portland and Orlando works with apartment dwellers. And a little context, City of Columbia is about 40% renters. We kind of think of ourselves as like the island of Manhattan. Everybody rents. And so we're curious to know what the PCEF does for apartment dwellers and what Orlando's done and doing for apartment dwellers. So Sam, I see you up. What say you?
Yeah, thank you. I think what I would say is we're still figuring that out. You know, our early focus, has been affordable housing because they're natural partners since they're already, but just the fact they're affordable. And so because of that, we do have investments that we're working with affordable housing partners to retrofit those buildings and make them efficient. So we're addressing and putting solar panels on solar panels to address the common area loads of apartment buildings, as well as the whole range of lighting, heat pumps, ductless heat pumps, heat pump water heaters, and those, so that we're addressing at least the load for individual apartment units. Non-subsidized, multifamily housing. This is just your regular apartment buildings. Those are a harder nut to crack because a big part of the work that we're doing is making sure that there is rent stability measures and other things that come with our investments. And those sometimes don't necessarily work as well with a privately owned apartment building where they may have no incentive to take that in, since the power bill is managed by is paid by the tenant. So that's something we're still figuring out. I don't want to discount the fact that there are plenty of willing multifamily building owners that would take our funds and get them through a nonprofit and take on these investments. It's just it's an area that early on in this program we're still figuring that one out. So I think that's to be seen, and it's an area that we see as probably the greatest potential and greatest opportunity and the greatest nut to crack for us. And it's something we're going to be focusing on here in the next couple of years pretty heavily.
Yeah, I would agree from Orlando's perspective, just real quick, both Portland and Orlando have an important policy around building benchmarking and transparency. And it's really aimed at getting multifamily. I believe multifamily is involved in Portland as well. We require multifamily and commercial to disclose their energy consumption, water consumption, carbon emissions every year and make that publicly transparent. It has started to create a driver for energy efficiency. But to Sam's point, it's really challenging when you have this, what we call the split incentive between landlords and tenants, and often the fact of how they're structured is through a triple net lease arrangement where they're paying all of the utility bills. And we do have the community solar program where individual tenants can subscribe to up to 100% of their power, as low as 10% and as high as 100% of their power coming from those solar farms. But cracking the energy efficiency and renewable energy nut in multifamily is still something that I think the industry itself is trying to work through. There is some new technology for solar that's helping to tie individual units for a large solar array so that each unit is getting a benefit, and getting the value of that renewable. But it is a challenge and something that I think we need to still work to.
Thank you. We had another question in the chat about the Portland Clean Energy Fund and why the 1% surcharge, and why is it called a surcharge, and who exactly is getting surcharged?
I can take that. So it's a 1% surcharge because we already have a business license fee that the city of Portland has for all businesses, but this PCEF only goes for corporations that have over $1 billion in national retail sales. So it only impacts retail companies, and so it's just for those retail companies that make over $1 billion a year nationally, they get an extra surcharge on top of their business license fee. That's why it's called a surcharge. And we chose this revenue mechanism because we wanted to make sure that 1% seems politically more palatable, and it's on gross revenue. So it's also sometimes called gross receipts. But I like to use the word gross revenue because that's, I think people understand that better, and receipts makes people think about the actual receipt that they get, and it's a very technical term to use. So we wanted it to be politically palatable. We wanted to make sure that retail companies, not manufacturers, were impacted, because we wanted to make sure that manufacturers couldn't just retailers can't just move, a Starbucks or a Walmart can't just move to the next city or town. They actually have to be where their customers are. So unlike manufacturers who might threaten more or actually leave. So those are some of the reasons we chose retail companies, over $1 billion and at least $500,000 in Portland sales, and 1% because it raises so much money, even just with 1%, and it seems relatively more palatable to our voters to make sure that we can balance both the politics as well as the funds that we need to raise to meet our equity and climate goals.
Thank you. Questions from the room?
I was curious to know what the cost of living for Portland is and how many people are migrating to that area versus Orlando versus Columbia. Just to kind of look at the comparison of why people are.
Okay. So I don't know if y'all can.
Please rephrase the question. On Zoom, we can't hear the question.
Okay. Oh, were you going to rephrase, Elaine, or do you need a
No,
read?
could you please rephrase? We could not hear the question because it's off mic.
Okay. So the question was about the factor of cost of living. And this might actually touch a little bit about LMI household financing, perhaps. We heard Chris talk a little bit about some creative financing tools in Orlando, but to what degree does the cost of living play into your sustainability and climate planning, to rephrase? Did I get it?
Well, certainly a focus on, as we've been hearing from Sam and Representative Pham, as well as here in Orlando, equity is a lens at which is centered front for all of the policy and program development that we're doing. So we're really trying to structure these solutions around the communities of concern, knowing that if we can solve it for them, we solve it for everyone in our community, right? From an access, from an opportunity standpoint. And so cost of living is something that we've taken into account from a subsidy standpoint, right? We have a program called Efficiency Delivered, and this is for both renters and owners of apartments or individual single family. They can contact our municipal utility to get a free home energy and water assessment. It's basically like a level 1 audit of their home. And then they get a report of the different improvements that they can make to reduce their bill. The utility in the city then provides up to $2,500 to make those improvements with no out-of-pocket expense from the renter or the owner, and then a repayment mechanism on the utility bill. So it's called on-bill financing or on-bill recovery. We do that over a 2-year period, 24 months, with 0 interest on that financing. And the idea is you can amortize that investment over time, right? To make the savings of the improvements greater than your monthly payment on the utility bill. Well, it goes even further for those with lower household income. So we subsidize 50% of that if you're under $60,000 per year household, and we subsidize 85% of that if you're under a $40,000 per year household income. So somebody who takes that program and takes the $2,500 in full will only have to pay back $375 if they are under that $40,000 threshold, and then amortize that over the 2 years. And they're only paying $15 per month for those improvements when they can be seeing $30 to $45 in savings per month. So they're cash flow positive. They're saving more than their little new payment. And those are some of the ways that we've structured the subsidy around people's household incomes.
Question over here.
Yes, thank you for all the presentations. Very interesting. I'm curious what the role of the state has been. Chris alluded to issues with the solar co-op, and I guess controlled by the state government via Public Service Commission. I'm not sure. Here in South Carolina, the Public Service Commission is all powerful, basically, and electricity sales from solar have to go through utilities, buying and selling.
Yep.
And they push back when that's any challenge to that. In the case of the 1% surcharge.
Thank you, Rosa. You have all my info, right?
In the case of the 1% surcharge in Portland, I'm curious what the state had to say about that. I don't know if that's would be legal in South Carolina, say if the city of Columbia, where we're located, did something like that. And if the legislature, if it were legal, if the legislature found out about it, they would take measures to make it illegal. That there
Yep.
couldn't be anything like that. So just in both of those cases, I'm wondering what the state's reaction and cooperation or not has been.
Thanks for that question. And I do want to recognize that different cities and states have different rules and statute about whether cities even have the ability to pass their own revenue mechanisms at the local level. I know that at least in New England often, or in others, and often in many other states, states can preempt even local jurisdictions' ability to pass their own revenue mechanisms. And even in Portland, we do have the ability to pass our own local revenue mechanisms. But I will say that one of the things that planted a seed for me about why the state legislature was such an important place to organize was in about 4 months later, a few months after we passed the Portland Clean Energy Fund, our opponents went to the state legislature. And at the time, the state legislature was trying to pass a Student Success Act, a really historic bill to fund education, also through gross revenue. And they were able to slip in a clause that would preempt any city in Oregon, actually, from basically using gross receipts or gross revenue tax. And they were almost successful at even exempting Portland. Frankly, the language was written in a way that could actually even have exempted Portland. We were able to make sure that it didn't. They thought they were grandfathering in Portland, but it wasn't even strong enough to protect Portland. We're able to protect the Portland Clean Energy Fund, but even as of today, there is a statewide preemption on any other city in Oregon from passing something like PCEF. So it is a huge problem. That statewide preemption is a huge problem for our state. So many cities, after we passed it, Eugene wanted to pass it, Hood River wanted to pass it, other cities saw what we're doing, and they're not able to do it because state legislators, and that was so infuriating. We didn't find out about it until it was too late. And so we were, community organizers coming into Salem trying to stop this, but it was already baked. And so we couldn't stop it. And to this day, it's going to be really hard. I'm thinking about, even as a legislator, how do we lift this preemption? And there's going to be a ton of pushback, but I don't have a solution. I would just say that's why it's so important that our communities organize both at the local level and at the state level, to be able to have our folks in the state legislature to be able to, if we had even been told about it before, we could have launched a campaign to fight it more strongly. So don't have any answers, but just a lot of solidarity and sympathy that we need. Often our local jurisdictions are a lot more progressive and able to see bold, innovative changes that are then stopped or preempted at the state level.
And that is definitely the case in Florida. And as you alluded, many of the southern states, we, the last legislative session got some serious preemptions around building electrification policies. They saw other states and cities across the country passing requirements for no new gas in new construction. That's been officially preempted here in the state of Florida. There's preemptions around our tree canopy coverage and protecting our urban forest. It's unreal what's happening. And just this past session, a couple of weeks ago, the legislature did approve an anti-solar bill that is going to start to roll back our net metering rates, which is the only incentive we have going for us. We can't do third-party sale. We have low-cost power. We have everything basically going against us in Florida, and we are the sunshine state of all places. And so there's an active attempt by the big investor-owned utilities to continue to control the market. They're using equity as their justification, which is a complete fallacy. And in fact, they're just being really strategic at hampering the growth of the fastest growing job creator in our state. So it is a concern, but cities still have the ability of hosting very creative programs. And I just wanted to stay on the positive and think about some of the opportunities ahead. I see some questions about affordability issues, and we talked about multifamily. One of the other policies that is being considered by cities is called a building performance standard, or a BPS. This would require existing properties to meet a minimum standard of performance for energy use intensity, for indoor environmental quality, for other affordability aspects. And it's a steep policy for any city to pass, requiring existing property owners to make improvements to meet minimum standards. But it may be the only tool that we have to begin addressing the affordability problem, because our utilities can have the best programs out there, but if the landlords are reluctant to use them and to make investments into their properties, we're back at square one, unless there's a requirement for these property owners to have to meet that minimum. And then you have utility programs that complement to drive a clean energy economy, to drive that market transformation towards clean energy and equitable solutions that we're all looking for. So keep a lookout for building performance standards. I think it's going to be coming.
Sam, any final thoughts from you?
I think all I would just say is that it's to Chris's point, it's a continuation to be creative. You know, these funding mechanisms are important. They're critical because we need investments to bring us to this place that we need to go into to make these investments so that we are climate ready, that we do have a climate ready future. And so, and that we are addressing our emissions. And so for that reason, it takes a lot of creativity to consistently get ahead of those exemptions, to work to work to address those preemptions at state levels. But it's I think, as Chris spoke, there's policy, which gives sort of in many instances the stick and it forces things, and then there's those carrots, and thinking through on those carrots are those investment vehicles, and they don't necessarily always, gross receipts or gross revenue mechanism is important, it's critical, it's valuable. There are other revenue mechanisms, and so it's continuing to be creative and think through what are all those mechanisms, and doing that work both at the grassroots level, at the state level, the grass tops level, and all those places. So I don't have much more to say other than that it does take creativity and a consistent pressure from all levels.
Well, heck to the yes. That was a great way to end our session. Columbia, let's give some love to our panelists. Let's hear it for Sam. Cannot thank you enough for being here. And I will be in touch because there were a lot of requests for your slides. So thank you so much. We appreciate your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Keep up the good work out there in Portland.
Yes. Likewise,
Thank you,
Chris, it's
Orlando.
great to meet you. Yes.
Likewise. And of course, Columbia, keep it up, please.
Wonderful,
Yeah, you all.
wonderful, Chris. I'm here in Miami-Dade and grew up in South Carolina, so I'm so glad to see you reaching out across state boundaries and getting the message all the way up the East Coast.
Trying my best. Let's keep it up.
So greetings from Miami-Dade and Jim Murley. Take
All
care.
right.
Thank you.
All the best.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
So you're staying 4 hours, right? It's in this room. The waste.
Yeah, very interesting. Not according to the schedule. Room 288.
Yeah, I think that's up on the second floor.